Welcome to the No Fear Podcast and the No Fear Live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear Podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. All right, Mr. Glover, welcome back to No Fear Live. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. It's been a crazy few years since I think I had you on. Did I have you one or two times on? I know we did something right in the middle of all the pandemic craziness and picked your brain on that. We've done some live things on Instagram, just talking about tactics and training. And I wanted to have you on, not just because, you know, I don't know if you realize this, but you're pretty iconic in the personal safety community. You know, you've really done something. I've told you this personally to your face, that what you've done with all of your training, your passion, I wouldn't even call it a passion, an obsession. You've turned it into something amazing, that will be generational for your kids, for your family, for your friends. And it's something you talk about and write about is your inner circle and integrity and trust and loyalty. But you've extended this, and I don't want this to sound grandiose to people listening, like you spend a lot of energy trying to make people you don't know safe and secure. And that's probably the inspiration behind your new book. And certainly your mission, since you started Fieldcraft, there's probably nobody, you know my audience, right? Mostly military, law enforcement, retired, active, CrossFitters, martial artists, jiu-jitsu, Krav, if somebody doesn't know who you are, they were in a coma and just woke up and they're going, who's this guy? So everyone knows you. But can you have like an elevator talk just to go like, this is me, I'm Mike, I started here, I got to here. Do you have just like what's your elevator talk? You know, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so I started a company called Fieldcraft Survival after a long military experience. Not with the idea of being the subject matter expert, but the idea of facilitating experts in their particular craft and connecting them with people, whether it was civilians, military, or law enforcement. The idea is to train people for the worst case scenario, and not the zombie apocalypse, because that could be the worst case, certainly, but whoever is out there, their worst day. It could be a vehicle accident. It could be an accident in their backyard. It could be civil unrest. And so that was the mission set. We started that adventure 8 years ago, post a military and some CIA contracting, and decided to fully commit. And thank you for all those words, those kind words. I certainly learned a lot from you from my military experiences. That was somebody out in the civilian world that was doing this and teaching this, albeit controversial always, because you know you're always going to have egos that are involved. I always looked at you as somebody who was that subject matter expert that I wanted to aspire to be and even act as in how you held yourself professionally. And so 8 years has been quite the obsession. It quite frankly has been taxing on me, my family, my team, but it's what we're bought into because it's our purpose and it's what we are very passionate about. And so, 8 years later, here we are.
That's amazing. And I, a couple of years ago, I used to always say I'm so passionate about safety and survival and self-defense. And I realize I'm not passionate about it. I'm obsessed with it. That in many ways, I'm more concerned with that person's safety than they are. And that boggles my mind. And I started switching it from passion to obsession. And this is why I intentionally did it there, because I've met you, I've seen your op tempo, I've been around you, and like, just there's shit going on all the time. And you never, in many ways, and I appreciate, you know, the kind words about me. I've never said no to anything. As an entrepreneur, like, I entertain everything. Like, what is this? Is there potential here? And you know, the only times that I've ever regretted that is if I was thinking about the value of it, the dollar value of it versus the actual intrinsic value of it. There's been a couple of times in my life in business trying to grow the company. I went, and this will be a big deal for the company. It'll allow us to do this or that. And that's always backfired. In you know, stay true to what your inspiration was when you started. And then I always imagine this: if there was no money, would I still do this? Like, is this something I would do if no one's going to make a buck? Is it the right thing to do for the right reasons, for the right people? And so Fieldcraft is that. I also love something you said there, that and just so you know, if in whatever way I was an inspiration to you, you've eclipsed anything I do in terms of growing the business, right? So I look at you for inspiration and indirect spiritual mentorship, where I'm going, fuck, look what Mike's doing. You said something really interesting, and that is, you've identified subject matter experts besides yourself and surrounded yourself with greatness, and then deployed them to run classes. That, you know, that's ingenious. Where a lot of people, like, you know, we have one product, it's spear, and we might have like stuff for an operator or stuff for a martial artist, but it's still spear. So someone has to be fully bought into spear to be able to, you know, teach the behavioral, the neuroscience, and all of that from there. So whereas, because of the prepared philosophy that you're trying to inspire in people, you go, look, you need driving, you need medical, you need hunting, you need shooting, you need hand-to-hand, you need you know, how to fucking survive in the woods and all this stuff. So it's pretty cool. Was that something that was drawn from the military? Like, when you went to a different school, there was a different subject matter expert. It wasn't, you know, the same person, you know, who taught you how to zero a rifle didn't show you, you know, how to put on a tourniquet. There was another SME. Was that where you got that idea from, or was that more entrepreneurial after?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of both. I mean, when I, you know, became a civilian and started teaching, for example, guys would always say, well, you don't know specifically one, you know, they think you're a special operations guy, you're supposed to know it all. And I started realizing in my own error that some of the things that I was teaching did not translate. For example, self-defense in a situation as an operator versus self-defense as a situation as a civilian in this time and place in our world is completely different. The considerations are very different. Not morally and ethically, that remains the same. I mean, legally. And so a lot of the things that I thought were tactics that you brought to bear, I was mistaken. And then I remembered the upbringing that I had in the military, where you brought in a subject matter expert. Like, you brought in Robbie Latham, you know, a professional shooter for Springfield Armory, very accomplished world champion. And you're not literally taking everything he is and applying it to your tool bag. You're taking the specific skill sets, like gun handling, like his methodology on acquiring a target, or accuracy, or transitioning from target to target, and then you're applying that to your craft. So I started realizing in the civilian space, there wasn't a connection with experts, period, through an institution. And you know, a lot of people who listen to this conversation immediately default to the knife, to the gun, to the self-defense, to the tactics. But I mean, like, I just had an hour-long meeting with a homeschool professional, and we're doing an expo / seminar here on September 30th in my new place in Provo, Utah. And why am I bringing a homeschool expert in? Because I'm trying to build self-reliance and self-sufficiency back into people versus outsourcing it to institutions. So the expert is the person who lives that. They do that thing. And I realized in trying to be short-sighted on the business side, I couldn't do it all. And certainly my narrow path of experience as a Green Beret does not apply across all the value that's provided in tactics. I mean, you provide very specific skill sets for specific reason, like identifying and understanding the K&O of knowing fear. And that's very important. And if you're an operator and you have an experience with that, you could certainly tell people about your experience. But if you don't live that, if that's not your thing, then you're not the subject matter expert. And so, the business side of it was very easy to start self-discovering that I wasn't the expert at all this stuff, and I needed to assimilate and accumulate experts from canning to jarring to tactical self-defense.
It's amazing though, when you've got that X factor personality that can galvanize people, and that's a bit of a true leaders have that X factor, and I don't know if you've always had it. You certainly, since I've known you personally, it's something that's so important in keeping a team together and keeping them on point, with the mission. You said a couple of things, you used the term outsourcing. I remember doing a podcast with Jack Donovan. I don't know if you've ever read his Violence is Golden treatise. Did you read that? It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Violence is Golden. Everyone listening to this, you should read that. Violence is Golden. But I was on his podcast and I was talking about, something that I said in 1980, Mike. My first. How old were you in 1980? Do you remember? Should I even ask?
1980?
Yeah,
I was born.
Right. So 1980. Holy shit! This podcast's over. Thank you, Mike. Holy shit. So 1980. I'm sitting in. California, what the hell was it? They've changed their office a few times. Burbank, California, Black Belt Magazine's office then. And, what's crazy is I'm sitting there talking to the editor of Black Belt, and I said that there was a time years ago where everyone knew how to fight, because if you didn't survive, or there were people around you that knew how to fight. And you knew which berries would kill you. You knew which mushrooms would get you high. You knew it. You knew all this stuff. And if you couldn't hunt and gather, you didn't survive. And I'm talking to Jack about this because I was talking about the origin of the spear system was this caveman combatives metaphor. I said, like after school, was there like a caveman kung fu academy? Like, how did people fight before we organized self-defense? This is a stance. This is a block. Well, they just fought using fear, using instincts, using intuition, using their human weaponness. And it was amazing. And I said to the guy, and you just made me think of this. I said, there should be as many self-defense systems as there are people practicing self-defense. And what you said before was, like if you're shooting with Latham or any other one of the greats that all the organizations and units with discretionary funds train with everybody. I remember when one unit brought in Evel Knievel for bike riding, right? Like, hey, we got money, that guy's what can we learn from him? And you brought up something that I don't think a lot of people who haven't gone through the Ranger, Green Beret, CAG, all the different like high end stuff where you're getting really specialty training. You don't bring in an Evel Knievel to like learn how to build a jump and then jump over, the Grand Canyon. You don't even know what you're going to pick up. You're sitting there going, fuck. And you suddenly get an inspiration. You're not there you guys are already tactical subject matter experts, but you made me think about this idea that when you were 10 years old, you fought a certain way. When you became 20, that fight changed. When you became 30, that fight changed. Then that fight changed when you became a parent, and how far you would go And then the fight changes when you become an entrepreneur and a parent. And I always remind people of this. It's not just the palm strike or the kick or the knife or the gun. It's the emotional, psychological factors that influence that. And ultimately what happens if someone comes to Fieldcraft and does all of your courses, you can't possibly absorb all of the information. You've got to, relative to who you are, figure out what it is. It's almost like reverse triage, where you figure out what is the most important thing that you need to survive right now. It's not reverse triage, it's triage. But anyways, thank you for that. I apologize for the rant, but you made me think about that quote. Like when people train, when you would bring people in, it wasn't like I'm going to copy all their shit or emulate everything. It was what can enhance my survivability for my training missions and then when I deploy, you know? So thanks for the blast down memory lane. So, but all of that, Jack Donovan said to me after, he said, you said, you don't want people to outsource their safety. They need to be their own subject matter experts. And I was like, to use the expression, you know, you're the first responder in your fight. The first responders are the second responders. Okay, let's talk. I'm going to pop up something that I heard. Did Jack do the intro on your audiobook?
He did. Yeah.
Okay.
That car.
So it's so funny. His reading voice is so different than like when I talk to him, you know, like I know him. I've been on his podcast. He's been on mine. I was like, is that Jack? It was so, you know.
So that's Ray Porter. His narrator is a professional narrator.
No, I mean, but on the intro on your book.
Yeah, it's Ray Porter. Ray Porter did it. I'm sorry. Ray Porter did the audio.
Okay.
Jack Carr wrote it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I was like, because when I saw that, and then I said, that's like, and I know like my wife that does this chameleon thing when she talks to different people, like I'm going, that's not your real voice. What are you doing? Like if she's ordering Chinese food, her voice changes. If she's like, like it's the fucking funniest thing. Anyways, I'm going to pop something up here because Ray, who is reading Jack's intro, I got it now, had this Steinbeck quote that's one of my favorite, and I think that's a great launch point to talk about the kind of the philosophy of your book. And I'll give everyone a chance to read this real quick from John Steinbeck. And for those of you on audio, I'll read it. I will lay down the law, and you will learn it word by word, and every word must be edged with fire. This is the law. Who's reading better, me or Ray? This is the law. The purpose of fighting is to win. There is no possible victory in defense. The sword is more important than the shield, and skill is more important than either. The final weapon is the brain. All else is supplementary. Clearly that is meaningful to you. It doesn't surprise me that Jack included it there. But I think at the end of the day, if we're going to fight, and everything's a fight, like if you're in a car accident, you're fighting for time. You're fighting to get the tourniquet on. You're fighting. Everything's a fight. So everyone listening to this, don't just think of a fight as a physical fight. Everything's a fight. Right now, we're fighting for our nation. We're fighting for our freedom. Everything's a fight. Talk to me about, or this is now, take the mic and just run like with that, and let's get into your book.
Prepare. Yeah, I think a lot of people uber focus on curriculum, on skill set, on specifics. And a lot of the reason I wrote the book in the first place is to, one, reduce the stigmas that are associated with preparing, period. I mean, prepping, it doesn't elicit a positive responses for most people. Most people have associated being paranoid or being crazy with being a prepper. And I get that. So I'm fighting a stigma, which is fighting an uphill battle. The important elements of skill sets are understanding that there are intangible things that we have to learn outside of specific material objects and tools and skills developed around those tools that are certainly important, if not more important. An example would be most guys would think self-defense, like it's like the word association game. If I held up a pistol and a waistband, you would go self-defense, right? And that's because most people think about the tool, the gun, etc. But if I held up the brain, would you say situational awareness? Right. Likely not. So the first intangible components of the book that deal with these things, like resilience, situational awareness, planning, they're not so clear cut. There's different philosophies on them, which I referenced several, but there's also a key component here, which is paying attention, which is being aware, being reasonable, reducing your arrogance and ego so you don't pretend like there's not a problem when certainly there is. And so I think culturally, that is the fight that we're fighting in society with all the other issues that we're dealing with as a country. And I think that's the most important aspect of preparedness. If you want to be prepared, yes, tools and their application, tools and their training are very important, but some of the most important aspects are some of the most misunderstood. That includes resilience and mindset. You focus a lot of your attention on building this in people, but if most people said, hey, you need a better mindset, they wouldn't know where to start. Well, Tony Blauer is a place to start, right? Understanding psychology and neuroscience as it relates to your biochemistry. That's very important, because just like you would know the symptoms of your vehicle, if you were paying attention in your life and you were able to be self-reliant in fixing those symptoms that you were seeing, like smoke underneath the hood, you got a low tire, those are able to be repaired because you understand the characteristics and symptoms. In ourselves, we don't know any characteristics and symptoms. So you bulge out of your neck, your face turns flush, your palms become sweaty, and those are the first signs and indications that something's going on in your system. If you understood the science or were willing to pay attention to what was taking place, then you can get ahead of it. I heard you say this a lot. You can get ahead of it, right? You're on the offensive side. You can mitigate these risks. And that's the first line of defense, not the pistol in your waistband.
Right. I love that. Identifying the pre-contact cues in your life. And a lot of people don't realize I talk a lot about how when people think of situational awareness, they think of the periscope metaphor, like head on a swivel. What am I looking for? Not realizing that your self-awareness is what is interpreting the external situational awareness. So if you don't have a psychological skill set for managing fear, you might suddenly take what was a legitimate pre-contact cue and you flip it through cognitive dissonance. You go, that can't be happening. Head in a bubble. I'll ignore that. I don't want to get involved. And that's a self-awareness fear management issue. So really very subtle points that you brought up there. It's very much internal, folks. And the whole neuroscience. And I was excited as we got to know each other that you were exploring more of that. And I saw you bringing up more of that neuroscience, even in your teaching, as you started coaching more. How much did you learn? This is a quick pivot. We'll come back to the book, because did you ever do a count on how many classes you've taught in the last 3 years, you personally? Firearms, long gun?
The combination of it all, hundreds.
Right. And so what's crazy is this. So I'm 63 now, and I've been teaching since 1977, right? And I would teach a lot in the 80s and 90s. That was my incubator period, and I taught every day. And then it started changing as I closed my school and I started doing seminars. Well, when 2020 happened, and a small group of people did this experiment on what they could do to the planet Earth, I started my garage gym, which was teaching every day, 5 days a week. And we're approaching class 600 classes in the last just under 3 years. And the observation I've made is I've come up with so many new drills, principles, concepts, demos, because I'm teaching so much more. So my question to you is, teaching hundreds of classes, one, did you notice that your shooting or weapon handling skill improved differently from when you were an operator? Because there's a Latin expression, qui docet decet, those who teach learn. When you're always performing, you're teaching and you're educating, your skill set, the neural patterns in your mind go to another level. So did your shooting get better? And did you start creating things that you were going, fuck, if I had a time machine right now, I'd go back to like this era, and this is how we'd be shooting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think not doing what you're saying by learning and evolving class to class, even inside the class, moment to moment, is the detriment to institutional teaching. I mean, institution, like you could look at it as like a symptom or a sign of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is just inefficiency in people. And when you have institutions that teach core curriculums, where do we start sliding and slipping away from evolving and learning as teachers and as students? And so when I started teaching early on, I realized in hearing my own voice and seeing the user feedback, whether it was on a range or inside of a seminar, that there were things that I was paying attention to that weren't as important as other things. And so what I do, even moment to moment, like even in the psychology of the class, if I see a class and people are slipping off and they're making mistakes, that's not a sign and indication that the audience is potentially messed up. It's a potential sign and indication that I am not getting across the points to them as I should be. And so I've changed course mid-direction in the middle of teaching. And so that has also evolved class to class. I never teach the same class the same. Yes, I have core principles, but I'm always looking for evolving the practice. And I certainly want students who have trained with me once, twice, 10 times to understand that I'm looking at everybody, Tony Blauer, Robbie Latham, Dan Horner, all the people, to see where I can evolve. Now I take that and I set it aside. Mike Glover, Tony Blauer do that. The detriment for people is when you have an instructor who's not doing that, and he's saying my objectives here are the end all be all solutions for everything. That level of arrogance also institutes your inability to grow and evolve as an individual, because especially young men start to take on this ideology. Well, he is the chosen one. That person, he knows because of his background. He knows because he said so. And what I tell often to all my students is, if anybody stands in front of you and they say they're the end all be all solution to tactics especially, then they're wrong, because tactical discussion should be just that, an open forum for provoking thoughts and ideas to constantly evolve and change. When you don't do that, being on the military side, I have seen literally what that has done. It's got guys killed. And so if you don't want to evolve at the speed of war, then you don't, and then you pay for it. If you do, you constantly assess, constantly weigh, and constantly grow and evolve. And I think that's a very important and critical component to not just a good instructor or a good institution, but how we should all be as individuals with an open mindset.
100%. I love that. One of my favorite quotes is, be willing to give up who you are today for who you could become tomorrow. And the only way you can do that is just to be weighing, considering shit that you see in front of you, thinking about it. That's huge. It's interesting when people come to our training, and especially the scenario stuff, I always tell them, like, you just want to experience this and then do an after action on yourself, right? I told a story last week, I don't know if it was on a podcast or a class, where, Bruce Lee had this legendary fight with this guy who said, you can't teach Caucasians, and I challenge you. So they fought, and the guy ended up turning when Bruce just like launched at him. The guy turned and ran away from him in this room, and Bruce sprinted after him. He was punching him in the back of the head, and finally gets the guy and beats him up. And afterwards, everyone's cheering, oh, Bruce, you beat the guy and everything. And Bruce is pissed. He couldn't believe how out of breath he was because he had to chase the guy. And he immediately, and he wrote about this in his book, like that experience inspired him starting to do sprints in his training, where most martial artists in the 60s weren't including sprints for this idea of I gotta chase the enemy, right? So, but it was really interesting. He could have easily not done anything, but that what's called in modern psychology the growth mindset, right? I want to continue to grow and evolve. Let's go back to the book. How long did it take you to write? I mean, you've been writing it for decades. You just didn't know it, but how long did it take you when you committed?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, it took from start to finish a complete year. Is how long it took.
Wow. Congratulations, man. I've been trying to write a book for 37 years. I keep on writing. I've never, there's this quote that I had, and I got to put it up. It says, art is never done. Right. And it's like, at some point you just got to go, let's go. Here you go. Let's get it out there. Art is never done. Well, congratulations on it. You have a favorite chapter? I mean, they're all interlocked. They're all interconnected. But is there one that, I'm going to read them out here. The chapters: the resilient mindset, planning, situational awareness, decision point, everyday carry, mobility, and homestead.
I think out of all of those, decision point, even based on just the things that we were talking about just now, that I learned through training, I think personally is the most important. My favorite is resilience. It always will be, because I think when I look at resilience, it's something fundamentally missing in our society and in us individually, but something that we can impactfully change right here, right now. But I would say decision point is the most critical and important for readers or listeners of the book.
Are there, let's dig a little bit into that. Is there, we probably have a lot of dads on this call and moms, but probably mostly dads who have kids. You can't explain to your 4-year-old resilience using that word, right? I remember my son when he was 7 years old. We were in a like a pawn shop type store on Melrose, up in Hollywood, and he's 7 years old. And there was this glass counter there, Mike, and he's like looking like this, and it's like jam packed with old clothes and all that shit. And I'm like looking around as I was looking for an old leather jacket, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, look at this!" And he leans forward and smashes his head into the glass edge of the counter, and it just hits the perfect angle, and he screams, but you hear a bang and a scream, and I pick him up and I grab him, and he's like turning away from me, covering his head. And immediately, it was crazy. There were a few women in the store. I immediately thought they thought I hit him. And I got really embarrassed. And because they're like, I mean, it was probably their faces, like, doing something like that. And I ran to a dressing room, made sure to check he wasn't bleeding or cut. It was just one of those things, you bend down to grab something and you headbutt somebody and you're both like going, fuck, right? So he's 7 years old. I'm in the changing room. He's on the ground. He's breathing. I go, "Dude, you're not cut. Look at me." I said, "Look at me. I want you to do something right away." And I put my hand up like a focus pad. I said, "Punch my hand as hard as you can." He goes, "Dad, I'm hurt." I go, "Hit my hand." And he goes, "Not a self-defense lesson now, please." Right? And I go, "Hit my hand. I want you to pretend a bully just punched you in the face. Hit my hand now." And he does one of these, like, he goes, like, begrudgingly, like I'm making him. And I look at him, I go, "That's not going to stop the bully. He's going to punch you again. Now fucking hit my hand." And he goes, "Dad, I don't want to do this now. I'm hurt." And he punches the hand and he cracks it. And I go, "Really? That's all you got?" And he goes, wham, and he nails it. And I go, "That was a good shot. I think that would have made a statement." And he's looking at me like this, Mike. He's going, and I said, "By the way, how's your head?" And he immediately goes, like he remembered he was supposed to be crying. I'm sharing this story with everybody here. Again, it just popped in my head because that was me teaching resilience to my 7-year-old. Right? Your body is tougher than you are. Your mind is more important, like the Steinbeck thing. Your mind, look at, you stopped crying and got violent. And then when the fight was over, you decided to start crying again. And that was like planting seeds for resilience. So for like a question as a dad, as a coach, as a mentor, aside from get the book, read the chapter, are there some things you can share about, what resilience means to you? Or examples of how you would describe it or inspire it?
Yeah, resilience is, in the literal definition, is your ability to bounce back, figuratively or literally. It could be a physical attack. It could be the worst day of your life in self-defense, or it could be you just got a phone call that your mom has stage 4 cancer. This trauma is common to all, by the way. A lot of people think like stress is bad. Well, stress, if you don't understand it, is bad. But if you understand it, it's actually good, because you could utilize that energy, harness it, and use it as an advantage, certainly tactical advantage in a self-defense situation. So I look at resilience as your ability to bounce back, but understanding that it's within your control to put yourself through different environments of exposure to allow yourself to build resilience in your own way. I was just talking to this homeschooling mother about, when we were talking about tactics of raising children and allowing them to play. And her recommendation, because I said, my kids are 4, I have twins, a boy and a girl. I said, I'm thinking about putting them in homeschool for preschool from 4 to 5. What do you think about that? And she said, honestly, Mike, kids, when they're ready, will be prepared to be academic. They'll be prepared with all the, prefrontal cortex development to be able to cognitively start that process. Until then, allow them to play, allow them to be wild and free, because you can't go back on that. And it made a lot of sense to me. The connections that they need now are running around the yard like wild animals, picking up flowers, picking up bugs, digging in the dirt. And that is exposure that builds resilience. If you look at your own childhood, whoever's listening to this, and you think about how you were raised, were you raised in a bubble? Were you compartmentalized? Were you restricted from doing certain things, like you couldn't go outside and play with your friends? On the other side of that, were you wild and free? Did your parents even know where you were at? Did you grow up in your neighbors' houses, running from garden hose to garden hose, surviving in the neighborhood? If you look at that and you weigh it, it's likely that if you were wild and free and exposed to a lot of challenges and adversity, that you're more adaptable. That's what resilience builds, by the way, adaptability. Because the number one characteristic, I don't care if you're a tier 1 operator or if you're a stay-at-home mom, the number one characteristic in survival, as case studied, is your ability to adapt, right? And when I look at people now who are tethered to their cell phones, who are immersed in technology, they go from their cell phone that they're reading in their vehicle, they walk into their home, and then they glue themselves to a TV watching YouTube. It's like we can't disconnect. So how complacent have we become because we've sheltered ourselves and refuse to be uncomfortable and exposed? So I think resilience is important, not only in yourself, but in your children, because it's within your control and your means. I'm on the bandwagon. I've been doing it since I was 15 years old. I do a cold water therapy, or you call it cold plunge. Why is that beneficial? Well, it has a lot of biochemical benefits. It releases dopamine and endorphins that are beneficial for you, boosts your metabolism, a whole bunch of things. But it also exposes you to a mental barrier of you saying, this sucks, I don't want to do this anymore. And then you getting past that, and just that one objective allows you to get a small victory in a moment in time. That's what we need to be weighing ourselves against. We need to expose ourselves to new challenges. We need to get through that situation, pass or fail. and then learn from it and continue to experience life. Me and Andy Stumpf, we're writing a book on leadership via our military experiences, me as a Green Beret, him as a Navy SEAL. One of the things that we advocate for is people just to go outside and leave the cell phone behind and do something different. He just set a world record with raising money for Folds of Honor, which is very important. And he did the 777, 7 continents in 7 days. They did it in 6 days, jumping in these different continents. And every single year, me and him have made a commitment as friends that we're going to push ourselves to do something challenging for ourselves every single year to push ourselves. That is something that you could do right now if you're listening to this. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes a little bit of effort to build resilience. Love it.
Okay, let's. I'm going to put the book cover up here for people to see this real quick. But can you dig a little bit into? You said decision. Your favorite was maybe resilience and the resilient mindset. Can you talk a little bit about decision point? What that means to somebody who hasn't read the chapter or heard the term or the phrase?
Yeah, many people know me for teaching tactical stuff. I actually now, based on the direction the company has gone, and our experts like Casey Hildreth and Matt, all these guys who have the expertise in tactical who are teaching for us now, I have taught more other courses like seminars, like rewilding. This weekend I'll have a group out in the middle of the woods focused on doing a primal reset versus the tactical. The reason I stepped away from just strictly doing tactical, which a lot has to do on a flat range and shooting paper and steel targets, is because institutionally or industry-wide, that is the translation of competency in your skill sets. And I've realized in teaching a course called Personal Security, where we weigh what is your decision to use deadly force? What does your moral, ethical, and legal compass look like with no training prior to this? And how do you fight through fear? How do you fight through stress? I've realized that many people who are the most competent gunfighters, as they would advertise, are likely the most quick to make a rapid, bad decision under stress. Like if you have an operator who's used to following rules of engagement of killing the bad guy, well, how do they see the bad guy in civilian life? What is a proposed threat? If you're in the state of Texas now, you would think stand your ground and castle doctrine completely give you the free rein to defend your life under any circumstances, as long as you feel like you're threatened. Except that's not how it works. I mean, a gentleman just went to prison for 25 years for murder because he defended his life inside of a vehicle against a guy who happened to be a protester, who happened to have an AK-47, and still his case and his decision to use deadly force, even though everything on paper, ones and zeros, very binary case, looks like it should have been a clear-cut case of self-defense. That doesn't apply now, because we have to be conscious of not only the decision at the point in which we make it, but all the other external factors that build the pattern of our current condition. An example is social media. You know why this kid in Texas went to prison for 25 years? Because days prior, he stated that if he was ever in a protest and ever in a situation where he was blocked and felt like his life was threatened, he would do what needed to be done. And I'm paraphrasing there. But basically virtue signaling that he would just take anybody out. If you delete your comment, because right now you listen to me and you go, oh, that could be controversial or high liability, that comment can be found by the metaverse and be used against you in a court of law. Yep. So we're not just talking about decisions that you're making at the point of saving your life and fighting for your life, but at the point in which you're virtue signaling your life and all the things that you would do, because all of that will be taken into context. I found that to be alarming, that many people didn't understand that. And so we started personal security to teach decision point. We have police officers and lawyers teach the legal components of this. And it's scenario based. You're not shooting a paper target that doesn't shoot back. You're not shooting a still target that's reactive. You're shooting at a person that you have to monitor and respond appropriately at all times. And you're literally putting the needle through the thread. And if you miss because you're weighing a little bit too aggressive, or you're not weighing heavy enough, then potentially not only will you pay for it with your life on the crisis site, but if you get through it, you might pay for it with your life in a court of law in a prison cell for the rest of your life. So I think that chapter is important in laying that case out, and also having people think about all the things they're doing. You know, I tell people like, hey, in this scenario, we're at a gas station at 2 a.m. And then I take a step back and go, the number one way to mitigate this risk, don't be at a gas station at 2 a.m, right? Decision point and all the things around it in that chapter are very important for everyday people who are interested in understanding how it works.
Huge stuff. And you're right. You know, one of the things you said is you're surprised at how many people had no clue of the totality of the circumstances and language and implication like that. Similarly, in our courses, we talk about the 3 fights. The first fight is between you and you. Do you have the will, the courage, the grit, the tenacity to move through the danger? The second fight is with you and the threat. And the third fight is CNN, mainstream media, legal, the politics of the police agency that is investigating the case. There's so much more. What a lot of martial artists do, a lot of the Instagram gunfighter guys, is like everything is shooting, kill zone, accuracy, speed, blah, blah, blah. And it's not teaching decision making. And not just, I think if you just said, again, like in the beginning when you said, I hold up a gun, what do you think? I hold up a brain, what do you think? I hold up a card that says decision making. Somebody from the tactical community goes, shoot, no shoot, right? Like they think like it's right there. They're not thinking about the emotional, psychological interference or chaos or the juggling of all of that is necessary before you make a decision. Amazingly insightful. Guys, if you're listening to this and you've listened to other subject matter experts, one of the things that I love about Mike is there's no, and I make fun of myself because I get so fucking nerdy and insanely caught up in my tangents that I get pedantic and obsequious in my choice of words. I just did it there on purpose because nobody knows what the fuck I just said, right? What's pedantic, obsequious? We'll look it up. And that's the serendipity of listening to me. Again, I'm fucking around here, is one of the things I've always loved about Mike, and you're noticing it now, is how the cadence of how he talks. It's so thoughtful, it's measured, and it's meant to educate and inspire, but it gives you the breathing space where you can weigh and consider on your own and go, I gotta train with this guy, or I gotta look this up. I gotta do whatever. I gotta pop a picture here. I told you this when I bought this hat in your store. I'm sure you recognize it. But I'm in awe of what you've accomplished, man. You know, I think it's amazing. You've experienced a bunch of the bullshit that any entrepreneur experiences, and we're not going to talk about any of the nonsense on here or give anyone a voice or attention. But you've handled yourself like nobody knows, because you never went online and went, you know, you just kept it free of politics, focus on the mission. This is our North Star. Good for you. When Mike opened his first facility, he painted a massive flag on his wall, "We the Prepared." And I remember seeing it and saying to myself, I'm going to go get a picture with Mike in front of that flag one day. And we did it. They've hosted us a couple of classes, and we've been up there. Guys, if you haven't if you haven't taken any of their courses, and your team teaches all over the USA. Is it worldwide yet, or is it just USA right now?
No, we do have the hope with our new online application that just recently launched is that it will become worldwide. We have taught outside of the country in Southeast Asia and Europe, but I want it to be worldwide. I think. I mean, I just signed a book deal for releasing this book in South Korea and in Ukraine. I mean, I had to actually sign approval to do that. It's like, why would you do that? I'm like, well, because people are living in situations now where this information is very pertinent to what's going on in their backyard. So I hope it to be worldwide.
Yeah, there's no reason. I mean, we teach worldwide. There's no reason. It's just there's definitely people that want it. And you have some of the best instructors in the world. There's no reason. And I could certainly introduce you to people offline who've hosted us, and why not? Let's do this. Let me look if I had any other questions, because I want to get to some of the questions online. This was one that you can dance around or be direct. You've been shadow banned for 3 years. You've had companies cancel deals with your company because of woke, ideology and shit like that. How much has what governments and the government are doing influenced the trajectory and speed of things Fieldcraft is creating?
Yeah, I think certainly it's influenced the speed in a positive way.
Right.
I mean, saying that is weird to say that out loud, but because of the controversies, it created more attention. It's like that idea that bad press is good press because of the attention. I don't want unwarranted attention, and I didn't ask for the government to suppress us or the FBI to put us on their list, but I know how the government works. I worked for the government for 20 years.
Right.
It's super inefficient. It's coming to a head now. We see the breakdown of government institutions. But look, this stuff is always going to happen. And if you're somebody who teaches something semi-controversial and you provide those resources, you believe in your mission, you believe in your purpose, you're going to have people, whether it's a corporate interest or it's a government interest, come after you constantly. And that just weigh it as 10% of the population isn't going to like you, and that's fine. And it's one of the reasons why, the FBI wanted to talk to us and work things out. It's like, I have no interest in working anything out with the FBI. People who have shamed us or put us in bad, me personally, even talk poorly about me. I don't give any energy and time to those people. Any energy and time to, committed to talking to a government agency, talking to somebody who wants to talk about a controversial thing I've said, is energy diverted away from my children. And so when I look at all the time that I have, the business is getting the amount of time it has. So I would say it's probably 70% of my overall time. Every single second outside of that is committed to my children. And so I don't have the time to deal with this. And so I won't. And as a point of consistency, because that's how I've always been since I've been in this industry, it's worked and fared a more positive light for our company, for Fieldcraft, than not. Some controversies, I have talked to people. I've tried to be professional about it. But I would just say that as a general rule of thumb, and I would give that as advice for anybody who's willing to put their name, their reputation, and their ass on the line, be willing to accept that and be positive about it.
Nice. Personal question from me to you. When you had not the bigger ones, because I mean the bigger ones are like the stuff you mentioned just now, but when someone would come after you personally, where you went, okay, this could affect our reputation. This is one of those things. If I defend it, does that mean I'm hiding something? If I ignore it, does that mean I'm hiding? Like, was there like a 24-hour incubation period where you went, fuck. And then you went, okay, we have an SOP for this, dude. This is a malfunction. We clear the malfunction and then we fucking find our field of fire and go in the right direction. Like how quickly?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we've had situations where people in specific spaces have come out, and what I've always leaned on is that most of these people are trying to divert a market because they have a scarce mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they think everything is feast and famine, and if they feel like they're starving or we're taking some of their market, then they come out and they say poorly chosen words framed together like it's meaningful, and then their followers will attack us, and it's this whole social media thing that you're seeing. Our SOP and all of that stuff is, one, if the person was a true professional, like I have before with people that I don't know, that I respect, I would contact them and then work it out, not even man to man, just professional to professional. So if I see somebody coming out and they cuss, they do a meme, they do anything that's negative, I refuse to interact with them. I will cut sling load, and that person is banned, blocked, deleted, not only from my company and from social media, from marketing, from partnership opportunities, all of that, but also from me ever engaging with them for the rest of my life. And so a lot of people would go, well, that just shows that you did something wrong. If we're weighing rights and wrongs on Instagram, then we are in the wrong business of weighing validity versus an amateur, right? Or a professional versus an amateur. I simply don't have the time. And as an SOP, yeah, it sucks. It hurts. But more so, I feel bad for those people and how they act like unprofessional human beings, but also I feel bad for the people that are following that negative kind of narrative. Name one person that has acted that way, or name one company that operates that way that is successful. I've seen it. I've been in this industry, a blip on the radar as compared to you, and I'm sure you could weigh in on this. I've seen those people and their characters and their form, different form factors of them, come and go, because that's what they're good for. They'll come, they'll get on the scene, they'll try to do this thing, and then they'll go away. And what I do every single day is wake up with a positive mindset and try to stay in the fight, focus on the mission. And I just don't have time for the nuances of radical behavior and just drama queens that just want to talk shit online.
I dig it. I love it. And I got to go meditate, because I grew up in when the internet was the wild, wild west. I talk about, like, my son, he's 32 now. He's been actually 16 years that he's been in, like, physical culture, coaching, strength, conditioning, mobility. But he grew up in the golden era of resistance bands and foam rollers and lacrosse balls. And I'm, like, in insane pain every day just because of things I did to my body. Our idea was warming up was we would get in the ring, tap gloves, and go, let's go light. And that's how we warmed up. And that, whenever you said let's go light, it never goes light. So, I think in some ways, because of when you got out of the military and started this, there was so much going on that you were able to see the worst and take the best. And like I'll see a comment on YouTube, like, about me, and I'm like, oh my God, like, how do I delete? I can't believe this. And I read and I think about it. And then I'll say to somebody, someone posted this thing on YouTube, and they go, dude, you never read YouTube comments. Like, everyone knows that except me, right? So somehow you were blessed and you learned all of these things. But I also think it has a lot to do with the education that you got in the military, and intuitive stoic values, getting shit done. Bad shit happens, keep fucking going, and like the metaphor, I come up with cool metaphors, I don't live them as much as I'd like, of like, okay, that's a jam. and metaphorically, you are inoperable if you're jammed up. Clear the fucking jam and get back in the fight and go. Dude, I could talk to you for hours, but we'll do more talks, especially when the new book comes out with Andy, who's also a buddy. There are a few questions in here. You got a few minutes to answer a couple questions?
Of course, yes.
Okay, let's do this. So this is just more of a comment from Michael over in Spain. This is wonderful. He actually posted about this on LinkedIn, and he's on every single podcast. Mike, I might have to get him a restraining order because he's on every single podcast listening. Always has good comments. He's also in the security field, and I love your course, that personal security course. I love the idea. Got people from all over the world here. Let me go to. Here's an interesting question, Robert McGuire. Mike, what's the most probable scenario we should prepare for, in your opinion? What a great question.
Yeah, I think, there's two scales to this. One scale is what's statistically likely to happen to you, and that depends on where you live. If you're close to a major metropolitan area, you know that violent crime is up in nearly every single heavily dense populated civilization. And that's across the globe, really. More people, more problems. Statistically, you're more likely to get into an accident or come across an accident than anything. So I'd say first aid is very important in individual preparedness, whether it's preparing to take care of myself, my family, or the people around me. Big picture, look, I think this country, 2024, is going to see a massive amount of civil unrest as an excuse based on the political situation, maybe as a justified reason even. And you're going to see a whole bunch of pockets. I mean, there was pockets in our backyard here in Utah, which is like Pleasantville. I mean, it's like one of the nicest places in the country. You're going to see it countrywide. And that's going to be based on politics, but it's also going to be based on opportunity. And the best thing you could do now is think to yourself, what if the infrastructure was disrupted for 30, 60, 90 days? Trucks couldn't get into the Walmart to feed the shelves that are going to feed you. You don't have potential power because a hydroelectric dam was damaged because of civil unrest. And so if you just take a step back and you ask yourself, like, how would I sustain my family and our lives for the long haul? What would that look like? And there's recommendations in the book on it, but I would say food, water, all that good stuff is important, but also a plan with your community. Like if you aren't linked in to friends around you that are your neighbors, that are going to lean on each other in the worst case scenario, then you need to start building and collecting a group of organized assets that are going to come to bear if something happens bad. And this doesn't have to be civil unrest in a civil war. This could be a natural disaster. You're going to have to lean on your neighbors. So I would say those two scenarios are likely the best to lean on right now.
Amazing answer. And I loved, and guys, this is what I was telling you before. Like this man, I'm not blowing smoke up his ass. It sounds like it. What a professional answer. He could have easily said something political or fear mongering. And it was like, well, it depends where you live. It depends who you are. The scenario always dictates everything, but who are you in the scenario? If you're part of Space Force, that's a bit of a joke, right? Like, you're what if an alien tries to mug me? So it depends on where you are, your proximity to potential threats, and the rest of the answer. I just made some notes down here, realizing something I said to you when I interviewed you during the pandemic, because I wish I'd prepared for the pandemic before the pandemic, right? So, and everyone who didn't wishes that too. Okay, here's a fun question. Mike, what are the brand new courses being offered in Provo? Anything new, or just you can just rattle off the classics? But are there any new ones planned?
So I hope to host Tony Blauer and a lot of the experts in our friend group that have expertise. We'd like to do that once a month. I'd also we're building a simunitions home defense lab that's based on certain scenarios, like the gas station, like the house. It's not for free flow CQB for law enforcement. It's for civilians. My first course that I'm teaching in this building is August 19th. It's called CQHD. It's close quarters home defense. And it's a mix of personal security, which is decision point, and the ability to work home defense scenarios, because it's not a direct action raid. I know a lot of military guys with my background are like, it's easy. You just take the husband and wife and they're a two-man team doing CQB, but the considerations are very different. I mean, one, the furniture in your home, you know where it's at on the walls. So why would you go left when you know you can go right? You know the layout of the building. You know the sounds of what the doorknob turning. You would know that in your own home. I know the plank of wood in my bedroom that makes noise every time I step on it when I go to the bathroom at night and I don't want to wake up my kids. Like, these certain nuances are part of the CQHD experience. And then hope to in the future, because we'll have jiu-jitsu in the back end, we'll have fitness to entertain people and building health and wellness as well.
That sounds amazing. Wow. Okay. Excellent. And you made me think when you said you stopped doing some of the flat range shooting stuff and you're getting more into the prepared mindset and stuff like that I might like to, even if we dovetail it with counter ambush for weaponizing the startle flinch, but doing more longer work on that whole mindset, no fear, stuff like that with your people. So your community's wonderful. Okay, next, here we go. Again, I didn't read this here. Robert asked this. In a wintertime, I'll read this for people who aren't watching the video. In a wintertime, non-permissive environment, having a fire could be life or death. How do you balance the threat of discovery over the need for fire? Dress for success, tape the hand warmers on your kidneys? ?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, a lot of people who are into primitive fire think it's novelty. It's like, you go to the store, you get the 1-inch ferro rod and you start fires for your kids in the backyard. That's a thing. But also is a thing, and especially river guides know this. People who work in the backcountry, hunters should know this. If you live in Alaska, everybody knows this. You fall into a body of water or you're into a position where your core body temperature crashes or plummets, you need to be able to start a fire immediately. And that doesn't start with fire access. That's like the worst case scenario of that situation. It starts with what you're wearing. It starts with situational awareness, etc. But let's put that aside, because the key is the fire component, I think, in this case. You obviously want to dress for success. You want to do all the things right, but you want to understand your operational environment. And for example, this is a shameless plug for us. I built a fire starter, and I did it from scratch. I said, hey, I want to make a fire starter that's the best fire starter. What are the deficiencies in most fire starters? They're just a piece of ferro or magnesium that is about this big, which is about a couple inches big. That is not good enough when your hands are soaked because you just fell into a body of water and they're frozen, or you don't have good tactile function of them. So you need something that's bigger. And so I got Austrian ferro or magnesium, which is the best magnesium in the world, comes from Austria. We imported that, we cut it, we got wood. The first bundle of it came from Oregon. The second bundle of it came from Washington State, because I wanted to use the wood on the back of the handle. This thing's 6 inches long that allows you to scrape wood, but also with one scrape, be able to spark the flame that initiates the fire. A lot of people who don't know fire starting think the magnesium that you just dump, it magically sparks this huge flame. You will get ignition to be able to start a flame, but you need tinder, you need all the elements to build this fire. So one, get the right fire starter. A propane lighter and all those things are good until you fall into a body of water. So having a good E in your PACE plan, the emergency in your PACE plan, and building redundancy in that is key. Also, lastly, a Mylar space blanket. Because if you fall in the water and you have a small 3x5 folded up Mylar space blanket. By the way, the R&D on that was billions of dollars because it's Mylar, right? It's what the most space equipment is lined with, but that can retain your core body temperature temporarily while you get the fire started. It's also what we use in Stop the Bleed, because your core body temperature as you bleed starts to diminish. So if you have that, you can literally whip it out, put it over you, start maintaining some kind of control of your core body temperature while you get the fire started. So those are my recommendations.
Crazy. And the first part of here, or the second question, threat of discovery over need for fire. I think that's one of the things that's the scenario dictates. You got to weigh and consider. It may be a choiceless choice. If I don't like the fire, I'm going to die for sure. If I like the fire, at least I'm alive, and maybe I can kick these fuckers' asses if they discover me. You got to sort of flip a coin with your intuition and your instincts there. Yeah. Okay, let's see if we got anything else here. Here's a question from Michael. Mike, I'm right in assuming after reading your book that you manage your preparedness and preparation, hoping life will never make you seriously need this. And I think this is more of an observation. I fucked it up. I'll let you.
Yeah, I think preparedness should be a lifestyle. So I don't think it should be a hobby. I don't think it should be a part-time kind of thing you do. Let me give you an example. Stocking dry food, right? Stocking dehydrated camp type food is very much associated with the marketing and the business components of a preparedness business. I would tell you that entire idea is not completely abstract, but it's not smart. So one, dehydrated food is 25-year shelf life food. I don't know if you've ever eaten 25-year shelf life food, but it's not very good. So it's the worst case scenario. But what do most people do? They buy the food, they put it in their closet, and they feel a sense of relief. That sense of relief is a false sense of relief. Because if you're really doing it, then you would make the idea of food storage a part of your life, right? Part of the lifestyle. So what you do is you go to the grocery store, and then when you buy groceries, you replenish the back end of your stock inventory and you take off the front end. Because my kids like mac and cheese. They don't like 25-year shelf life camping food. So they eat the mac and cheese. I stockpile the food and store the back end of that. And so I'm constantly eating off the front end like a grocery store. I mean, I take a box and go downstairs, and I'm like at a grocery store getting all the goods that I need. And I go upstairs, and that's what I feed my kids and feed my family. That is a very good way to introduce the idea of food storage in your life that is manageable, but also more realistic, because you don't want to be eating the 25-year shelf life when shit hits the fan. So look at all these nuances. Don't ever get a false sense of security because of these nuances. Like, I don't want to name the company, but I'll say that I think this is a great example, bad version of it. When somebody says you want a go bag, and then you buy the go bag and it has everything you supposedly need, you zip it up, you put it in your vehicle, you put it at your home, and then you call it good. That is the worst of the worst case. Because the worst of the worst case is you think you are prepared, you go to the bag and you realize you never opened it, and you aren't trained on anything that's in it. So the time and place to try to get good use out of the equipment that you're preparing for in the worst case scenario is not at the moment in which you're potentially going to die. So get the equipment, teach your kids, learn it, and make it a part of your life. So that's how I live. I mean, I personally don't just teach this, I live this lifestyle, and it's difficult. Like I always say that homesteading is the most difficult chapter, but also the most difficult component in actually living, because I suck at it. I grew up in a trailer in Daytona Beach, Florida. I grew up in a small house in North Carolina. I did not grow up on a homestead. I just recently lost 4 chickens and 2 ducks because a coyote got to them. That's a complete failure for me. My goat just got out and ate $1,000 worth of fruit trees. It just happened like 2 weeks ago. But what I do is I go, man, that sucks, but I'm going to stay in the fight. I'm going to reinvest. I'm going to stick with it because this is my lifestyle. And that's something you got to get around. You have to manage your expectations because it's not easy.
Is there, there's probably a lot of people here who are city dwellers. And like some of this stuff is just not possible if you're living in an apartment. A lot of the stuff is, do you get into that in the book at all? As far as, okay, you don't have a plot of land, you can't do this stuff. This is what you need to be thinking or doing.
Yeah, for sure. And in the book on homesteading, we talk about this very specific thing, which is, not everybody has the 5 acres in the mule. They just don't have the opportunity to grow their own food and do certain things. But let me give you a great example. Hunting. I grew up hunting. I grew up fishing. That was my lifestyle as a child, especially fishing. I mean, my dad would take us fishing, not to recreationally fish. We fished for fish that we were going to eat for dinner because we were poor. I mean, so like I understood that kind of guideline. If you are in an apartment, in a trailer, in a condo, and you don't have the ability to do these things like grow your own food, hunting and fishing could be the first step in the right direction. Because the idea is you've outsourced the food supply allocation for you and your family to a grocery store. You likely don't know where that food came from, but for convenience sake, you've outsourced that component of your life to the institution, to the business. So all I'm asking is, if you're building self-sufficiency back into the model, if you look at hunting, very doable, because you can do a deer hunt. I mean, you can go to Iowa and shoot a random arrow in the middle of the air, and you're going to kill a whitetail somewhere in that state. There's plenty of opportunity to go through that whole beautiful process of getting the equipment, doing the loadout, land navigation, the stressors of the environment in the hunt, and then the satisfaction of breaking that bread with your family, knowing where that food came from. That's what we're trying to build in the model. It's not so tangible and not so binary that it's just very black and white. The whole entire meaning behind this is that just being part of the process is the beauty in being prepared. So be the first in your family or the first in your apartment complex to go for a hunt. Go on a fishing trip and go get 20 pounds of fish and put it in your freezer. And when you start seeing that, you'll start realizing, like, man, I don't have to have a storage closet in a basement full of food. I could just do it in small, reasonable elements in my life. And that's going to be the beauty of preparedness, because it's not a one size fits all. It needs to fit your life and your lifestyle, and it needs to be convenient, to be honest. If it's not convenient and you don't make it fun and convenient, you'll just check out. You'll be like, yeah, this is cool. I virtue signaled on Instagram for one post and it was cool, but I'm never doing that again.
Nice. Beautiful. Dude, what can I say? Thank you for sharing your time. Some great answers there. Very deep. Like I told you all listening, deep, meaningful, inspirational. The focus of this was more a little bit on getting to know Mike, but it was more on his, the new book, Prepared. And, you can pick it up. Also, there's an audiobook. I'm big on audiobooks, so I got the audio version, and I'll listen to Mike, talk to me at night. I snuggle up with a hot chocolate and listen to him serenade me. I would love to get back and come do some stuff when the new place is open, get on the schedule. They have so many amazing products and things that they've built through trial and error because they run these courses. So they're truly innovators in this space. And, I don't know what the demographic of my listeners are. So some of you might be going, wow, that gave me some ideas. And a lot of you are still in I just got a gun and for home defense, and that's where you're at. They got programs for that too. Just like everything out there. Go to their website, follow them. Elisa, let's pop up the Fieldcraft website. So go to Fieldcraft Survival, check it out, get on their newsletter list. They send out great stuff over and over. Mike, is there anything that we're going to get off and you're going to go, shit, I forgot to mention this, or I wish we talked about that. Anything we didn't cover?
No, we covered it all. The application is available wherever apps are found. That's everything from, again, the canning and jarring to first aid to self-defense. It's all available wherever apps are found, and you can tether it actually to your TV as well on most of these applications, and it's just Fieldcraft Survival is the name of the application.
Nice, beautiful. Okay, guys, as always, thank you for logging in and listening. Remember, to share this with people who couldn't make it. Comment, post, share, follow us on YouTube. We're trying to grow that. And what else? We'll see you soon with future guests. And Mike, stand by in the background here while we upload the video. And let's thank Elisa, who's over in Austria. She actually, besides working for me, she's in Austria packing Glocks, sending them to Mike. She's like
Glock rep.
She's your Glock rep. Elisa, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you everyone. Have a safe rest of the week, and we'll see you on the next call.